And we are live. Hi, I'm Brett Premack, and today we're celebrating Randy Brecker. Randy's 70th birthday is coming up at the end of November, and he's also got a new release, Randy Pop Live, where Randy and his group play some of the music that he recorded over his remarkable career, recast by the great pianist and arranger Kenny Werner. So let's first of all greet our guest today. First of all, the man of the hour, Randy Brecker. Hey, Randy.
Hey, still alive and kicking.
Randy joins us from his home somewhere deep in the Hamptons. How's everything today? How's the family out there?
Everything's great. The weather's been great, and we saw some old friends last night, so it's moving slow, but it's really great out here. We really enjoy it.
And speaking of family, Randy's daughter, Amanda, is joining us from New York City, who also appears on Randy Pop Live. Good afternoon, Amanda.
How you doing? Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. And a couple of old friends and collaborators, the aforementioned Mr. Kenny Werner, who joins us from upstate New York, the Werner Mansion up there. Hey, Kenny.
Hey, good to see you. Good to see everybody.
And last but not least, from Los Angeles, from Canyon Cove, our good friend and everybody's good friend and wonderful sax man and educator, Bob Mintzer. Hey, Bob.
Hi, Brett. Hi, everybody. Glad to be part of this. And where am I?
Yes, I know where your dog is.
Sonny, Bob, is Sonny nearby?
Sonny is lurking. Our dog, Sonny, that is. Yes.
Yeah. So let's just start out here. Before we got started, I mentioned to Bob, I asked Bob about Friday night. Friday night there was a tribute to Jaco Pastorius at the Monterey Jazz Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Now, didn't you guys play with Jaco together, Randy? Yeah. Didn't you and Bob?
That we did for, 2 or 3 years. I replaced my brother, so I had some heavy shoes to fill, but it was a great band. We did probably the only really, to this day, long U.S. tour. It was 4 or 5 weeks on a bus. We traversed the whole United States with the sextet, and we had a great time. Played in front of the big band, went to Japan a couple times, and you can see it. I guess the best-known concert is Live in Montreal, which was a pretty crazy gig, which is up on YouTube and has, I think, like 1.5 million views.
Bob, what do you remember about that group, that Jaco Big Band?
Oh, it was a great bunch of musicians and challenging music, very spontaneous. There wasn't a lot of discussion, as I recall. You kind of jumped up there and figured out your part. Jaco was somewhat preoccupied with his scene, but the music came together beautifully, and it was inspiring, and it was incredible. I mean, you know, we were playing Donna Lee in front of thousands of young people. It was surreal in a certain way, but a really great opportunity to present some, terrific music to a large audience.
Randy, what do you think it was about Jaco that made him so appealing to so many people?
Well, I mean, he set the standard at the time. I mean, nobody had come close to playing the bass like that. He had a certain sound, that was associated with himself, and he had amazing, incredible stage presence and charisma. So the combination, he was a great writer, great arranger, so you roll those all into one and you have a jazz icon. He's still remembered. He's still #1 bass player. There's a lot of other great players out there, but, when you think of the electric bass, you think of Jaco first.
Absolutely. Bob, you've had other big band experience with Randy. Wasn't Randy one of the trumpet players in your first big band?
Yes, he was. And, Randy was the trumpet player you wanted to have in whatever kind of band you were having. He's just such a wonderful musician, has a strong personality. He's a team player, great guy. Just did it all, and it was an honor to have him in the band, and I always relish the opportunity to play with Randy. It feels comfortable. It feels great all the time.
Well, in some ways, the big band came out of the scene at 7th Avenue South.
Oh,
That's
someone
right.
Is that Adam Rogers there?
That's me.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, Adam.
Oh,
Hey, Randy.
Hey, man, long
man.
time no see.
Hey, man.
Oh my God, that's amazing. How you doing?
Yeah, man.
Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm trying to figure out how to make this a full screen.
Okay, well, while you're getting it together here, we're going to
Sorry to bother. Hey, Brett. How you doing?
bring you in a second. So I was asking Bob, your big band came out of the scene at Randy and Mike's club, 7th Avenue South, didn't it?
Yes, it did. That club, run by Randy and Michael, was a golden opportunity of sorts for people that were trying to play a little differently, perhaps, and didn't fit into the mold of maybe the Village Vanguard or the other clubs in town that had sort of particular agendas. So you could go into 7th Avenue South and basically play what you were hearing in your head, and that was an incredible opportunity. And there was just a group of people that played there with their respective bands, and I just simply started calling them kind of on a lark to see if they might be interested in being in this big band. And to my total surprise, everyone seemed interested, and a big band was born, something I really hadn't ever intended to do, actually, but it just kind of sprouted feet and started running, so I hopped on.
Well, a lot of us who were around New York in those days fondly remember 7th Avenue South, but I always wondered, Randy, why did you and your brother want to be in the nightclub business?
That's a long story, and I can't say that we did, but I'll just try to phrase it as quick as possible. We were big fans of the club Boomers, and we got very friendly with a guy named Bob Cooper who ran Boomers. That club closed, much to our dismay and many musicians' dismay, because it was a really nice, kind of out-of-the-way hangout. Bob found another a venue, and he needed a small loan, so we kind of contributed some money to help him open. He found another lady who also wanted to contribute, Kate Greenfield, and lo and behold, when it got time to get the liquor license, he had too many traffic tickets, if you believe that, so they blocked him, and he got mad and split. So we were actually kind of stuck with the club for starters. Three completely inexperienced individuals, but Kate was a really fast learner, really a hard worker, and it's really due to her diligence that the club survived as long as it did.
How long was the club open, Randy?
Well, we had a 10-year lease, and that was it. It was open from 77 to 87, and we had a friend who owned the club purely by coincidence, but he was owned the building, but he was a music fan, and we got to know him pretty well. But he had to leave New York and had to sell the building, and a typical story, the new owners decided to triple the rent, and we had just too many problems at that point, and that kind of was the finishing blow.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of memorable gigs there. Kenny Warner, did you ever go to 7th Avenue South?
Sure. I mean, I was in the scene already by then. I had moved back to New York in the mid-'70s. I played there a few times. I forget with who. And in fact, those are the only times I ever played with Jocko, because he would, as you know very well, Randy, would come strolling in and want to sit in no matter what. So I think I played with him 3 or 4 times. It was always at 7th Avenue South. I don't remember who I played with, but of course we always had a very wicked good time there.
Yeah.
Too good.
Too good a time, yeah. But we live to tell the story. We live to tell the story.
Yeah.
Randy, what about the guy who, I don't know if this should be discussed, but the guy who showed up, the like kind of mafia guy at some point? Mike told me the story years ago and said, sort of inferred like something additional had to be taken care of. Like, remember what I'm talking about?
Well, we had a friend there, and his name is Cha-Cha.
Cha-Cha.
Oh, yeah.
I know him too. I remember.
He's a great guy. He actually lived in my building. I don't quite know his connection, but his nickname was the mayor of Little Italy. And if you view any movie that had scenes in Little Italy, including Goodfellas, Cha-Cha is always sitting at the bar. He's always in one scene. He was in The Sopranos, and supposedly the movie Get Shorty was based on his moved to Hollywood. He started out as the manager of Tony Danza when Tony was a boxer. And
Wow.
he actually had some success in Hollywood. He did a couple kind of movies that made some money, and he's still around. He has a radio show, last I heard, called The Wise Guys, and he was an incredible character, wonderful guy.
Cha-cha, right? Yeah.
Well, let's go back a little bit, Randy. Why did you come to New York? What was it that made you move to New York? Did you have a gig, or?
Well, it was a lot happening. I had spent the summer of 1966 in Europe, and previous to that summer, I was on a long State Department tour as a result of our band at Indiana University, our big band, winning the Notre Dame Jazz Festival. We were awarded a 4-month tour of the Middle East and Asia. So we were in all the Arab countries, all these places that are falling apart now. We spent quite a bit of time there. It was really a life-altering event when we look back on it. We just had the 50th anniversary of the big band. It was an incredible big band. Gary Campbell was there, Jerry Green, guys that have also gone on to do great things for the music and music education. After that, I went to spend the summer in Munich with Don Mintzer. There was a club called the Domicile, so I met a lot of people that ran through the club. There was also a jazz competition that I attended and won second prize, and I met a lot of guys that eventually came to New York at this competition. We were all like 20 years old, 17, Miroslav Vitus, George Mraz, Claudio Roditi, Tomas Stanko, Jan Hammer, Joachim Kuhn. I'm leaving out some, but we met as kids. We were in a youth hostel for about 10 days as they whittled down this thing, and the judges were Mel Lewis, Ron Carter, Cannonball Adderley, J.J., Art Farmer, and Joe Zawinul. And they took some of us under their wing, so I had a really easy time when I decided to move to New York. After that was over, I enrolled at NYU and was trying to finish my degree, and I just kind of, for lack of a better word, there was so much work, I just kind of got sucked into the scene. Mel asked me to join his band with that, and I was asked to join Clark Terry's big band, who was a judge at the Notre Dame Jazz Festival. So I had a pretty easy time of it moving to New York, and it was so much work. I took a leave of absence from school, and that was it.
Well, we've got 3 veterans of Thad and Mel's band here. Bob, when did you join that band?
1978.
And why was that experience special for you?
Oh, for the obvious reasons. It was a fantastic band, great musicians. There was a real band sound and tradition that had been in place for a couple of decades prior. And Thad Jones was, one of the great arrangers, composers, band leaders of all time. And it was just such a revelation to be a part of that and sit in his band and watch him and experience the music and play the music. And it had a huge impact on my musical life.
Kenny, an impact on your life as well?
Oh, absolutely. I joined the band around, I guess, 85. And I was in the band till around 95. That was when it was just the Mel Lewis Orchestra. But I feel like, I wasn't with Thad, but his music was the only thing. You could play it every week and never grow tired of it. I mean, there were a lot of great arrangements there, and I never grew tired of any of them. But, I mean, you could re-experience the joy of playing a Thad Jones chart that you had the first time you played the Thad Jones chart. There was something kind of amazing or mystical. I don't know what the element is. And he tremendously influenced me in my first few big band things that I wrote, first a few which were for the Mel Lewis Orchestra, but then I went on to do some of the European bands, and I have a couple of CDs out like that, and definitely is part of it, which is completely owed to Thad Jones. And Mel was a real unsung hero. I certainly, to play with him for 10 years, explains a certain swing that comes natural to me now that I never even think about, but it came from playing with him and Dennis Irwin. As late as 1985, I don't believe there's anywhere you could find a rhythm section like that, if it ever did exist, between Dennis's earthly tone and feel and Mel, and I got to play with that for 10 years, so tremendously influential on me.
Yeah, well, a lot of musicians' roots are in big bands. Randy, you played with Thad's band, you played with Clark Terry, you played with Duke Pearson.
Right.
Why are big bands so strong in your background, in your life?
Well, I came up listening to big bands, Maynard, Stan Kenton, Woody's band. When I was 15, I went to the Stan Kenton band camp at Indiana University, which is why I ended up going to college there. And Marvin Stamm was my ensemble director. He was a youngster in the band. Peter Erskine was at the camp. He was like 7 years old and played great then. His father was the camp doctor. But I just fell in love with the sound. I'll never forget, the Stan's band would play every night with Dee Barton on drums, who was really a trombone player. But it was amazing, great players, that band. Charlie Mariano was around. He wasn't, I don't think, playing in the band at that time, but he was at the camp and had his start in Stan's band. So just the sound stayed with me. Then I fell in love with Maynard's band. I used to go hear Woody Herman's band when Sal and Joe Romano were in the sax section and Jake Hanna on drums. So I always had that as part of my upbringing, so to speak. And there was quite a bunch of big band rehearsals with local Philly guys in our living room. A guy named Evan Solat had transcribed a lot of Stan's music, and when I got old enough to really play, well enough to play it, we had a lot of rehearsals in our living room with local cats from Philly.
Let's go back to the 70s, and there were a lot of people with lofts. Bob Mintzer, can you talk about those early days when you would hang out with people and play music in lofts?
Yeah, that was a great time. That was the thing that kind of sucked me out of college. The loft scene. Everybody was playing, and it got to a point where, let's see, do I go to history of Western art class? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but or do I go to a jam session with John Abercrombie and Jack DeJohnette? And sort of the answer became fairly obvious. But yeah, it was a time when being a starving artist was affordable. Nobody I knew was making a living playing jazz exclusively. I mean, we all did other things, and it was it was sort of expected that things would go that way. If you were lucky enough to get a gig with Chico Hamilton or Horace Silver or somebody like that, so be it. But we just were out there to play, and the lofts were generally in commercial zoned areas where you could play all night. And I had two lofts, one on 28th Street, one on 21st Street. And Randy's brother Mike was around the corner on 19th Street, so we were always at somebody's loft playing. In fact, I heard Randy play. There was a loft that organization Free Life Communication did their concerts in, and I remember going up there and hearing Randy and Bob Moses and Dave Holland and this wacky crew of musicians. And I think it was Moses's band. It was like, it had some name from like a planet other than Earth, and I mean the music sounded that. It was really great. It was just sort of wide open and freewheeling and very adventurous, and it was a great time that I'll always remember.
Yes. Yeah, well, around that time, a lot of changes in music, free music, fusion music, whatever you wanted to call it. Randy, do you think the loft contributed to the changing music, the experimentation?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I spent my first couple years going up to. For me, the two major hangouts were Liedman's Loft on 19th Street, where we played every style of music you could possibly imagine with different players. Lenny White, Barry Altschul, Moses was there. So just those three guys played so differently. One day it would be a bebop session. The next day we'd play totally out. The next day it would be something in between. Also, I have to mention Gene Perlat was another hangout. His loft with Jan Hammer had already moved to town, who I had met at that jazz competition. So, and Don Elias, they were best friends, and I was very close to all of them too. So there was a lot of happenings at that loft too. Just kind of float from one to the other.
Kenny, when did you first encounter Randy?
Oh, gee, well, I mean, as a listener, just coming up, early, mid-'70s, we didn't know each other. And I don't remember how we met, but I asked him to play on something for me, a record I did, I guess it was around '81 or '82 or 80, maybe it was a little later, and that was called Uncovered Heart. And it was Randy, Joe Lovano, John Riley, and Eddie Gomez. And, you know, I don't think I knew Randy that well, so I didn't know what to even expect when I invited him to play on it. But he was so open, so available. We did know each other already, so it wasn't a total surprise that way. But
Yeah.
and he was totally into it, as everybody that ever works with him would say the same thing.
I think Jim Pepper introduced us. He brought me down to your loft one time.
Oh, okay. Well, it might have been even the place in Brooklyn then.
Yeah.
I had that building with 3 stories. It could have been that, but
I forget where it was, but we did a gig at Lush Life too. I remember. I think with Jim. It was my record.
yes, I remember that. Now that you mention it, I mean, you know, the old cliche: if you remember the '70s, you weren't there.
Yeah, part of us
Really
were.
applies to most of us, you know. But then we did things. You know, we would be brought together by one thing or another.
Yeah.
And then I started having a quintet several years ago. It was Randy and David. Sometimes it was Brian Blade or Antonio Sanchez, Scott Colley or John Patitucci. And Randy has participated in tours and records. And, you know, I always have to remember, geez, this guy is, you know, I just remember who this guy is because he's just this real, just like what Bob said, a super supportive person that's into your music. It makes you feel like you're making special music and just wants to support it, you know. And then you remember who this guy is. Sorry, Randy, because I'm looking at you right now, but you just remember who this guy is, and such humility is just, you know, it's overwhelming.
Well, it goes both ways. You guys are all great to play with. What can I say? It was for real. And listen to your music.
Adam, when you were a kid, did you listen to the music of the Brecker brothers?
I did, yeah, totally. I can't remember what record. You know, I was, as a lot of guitarists were, or are, you know, we started out playing rock. So I was into like Hendrix and P-Funk and Led Zeppelin, and I think it might have been maybe heavy metal bebop that someone turned me on to, and I went, wow, what is this? It sort of has the vibe of the music that I understood and this other, you know, these other levels of sophistication. It really kind of blew my mind. I didn't understand it, like the parts of it that weren't just rock, but it was one of the sort of important early influences in my becoming a jazz musician, along with Weather Report and, like, you know, Bitches Brew and Jack Johnson, because I think it led a lot of, you know, Mike and Randy helped a lot of people sort of understand jazz music better, you know, because so many, I mean, young people like myself in the 70s who kind of understood rock and were coming from that, and the combination of the real organic combination of jazz and rock music, which I would, you know, it's one of the ways that I would describe the Brecker brothers. It's really jazz rock. It's like real rock and real jazz, and that struck me very hard, I think partially because it really had the power of rock music, you know, so I got that, and then the sophistication of the, you know, harmonic and melodic and rhythmic sophistication of jazz that excited me, and, you know, I didn't understand it. That, as I said, along with Weather Report and various other things, led me to trying to figure out what was going on with jazz and start to listen to Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. So, you know, Randy and Mike were hugely influential in that way.
Absolutely. Let's move over to the Brecker family. We're privileged to have with us Randy's daughter, Amanda. Excuse me. What was it like growing up in a musical household?
It was amazing. It was very unique. Unlike the majority of my friends, I would go home, and at night when it was time to go to bed, I would hear, you know, my mom and my dad practicing until late hours of the night. And I grew up in the studio, in and out of studios, and would set up a little bed and just watch all night. So it was, I feel like I grew up fast in a way, because I was always surrounded by amazing musicians, and it was such an inspiration growing up. And I myself, of course, I'm a musician as well. So just having that, you know, being around two people that I admire the most was very special.
Amanda, did you know from an early age that you wanted to be involved with the music? You wanted to be a musician?
Uh, I did. At an early age, I knew that I wanted to be involved in music. I didn't know at the time to what capacity, if I wanted to be a performer, but I sang at a very, very young age. I recorded on my mother's albums. I was a special guest on one of my dad's albums, I remember when I was a kid, and other people's as well. And I felt very comfortable on stage, and I was always in band, so it was always ingrained in me. It was just part of who I was, and still am. And I still do it to this day. I don't do it professionally as much as I used to. I still perform. I have another career as well in real estate, but it's always been a huge passion of mine and always will be.
Yeah, well, you heard So Much Delight on Randy's new release, Randy Pop Live. We'll talk about that in a second. But Randy, I wanted to ask you, given the ups and downs of the music business, did you encourage your daughter, or did you say, wait a minute, you should really be careful about doing this?
Well, it was kind of both. She had a pretty realistic. We didn't have to say much, I guess, because she was so close to it. She could put two and two together and see and determine the ins and outs of the music business firsthand. So, but she was like she said, she was always a great singer. I go back to when she was how old are you? 8 or 9 when you sang Milton Nascimento's tune on one of her mother Ileana Elias's record, and later, by pure happenstance, how old were you when you actually sat in with him at that sports arena?
Paris.
Yeah,
at
Paris.
At the Olympia. It was I was 9, so we sang.
So 9 years old. Imagine that. She came up on stage. It was like maybe 2,000 or 3,000 in the audience. People, and I happened to be there, I think, with Mingus Big Band, and Ileana was there with a Brazilian all-star show, and so we just were all there at the same time. It was incredible. She came up and really just sang great, and Milton was very moved and became a fan of hers, and they're still in touch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we love Milton as well. He's still around, thankfully.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump over here to another member of the Brecker family. Unfortunately, he can't be with us, and that's Randy's brother, Mike. Since all of us have had some experience of dealings with Mike, I just wanted to go around and ask everyone to share a Mike Brecker memory. Let's start with Bob Mintzer. Just any Mike Brecker memory that stands out.
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, he was such a broad, interesting character and a wonderful human being. It's really hard to pinpoint one, but he was just such a natural musician. I think that's what always struck me. You know, we were actually rehearsing for the first Jaco Pastorius performance at 7th Avenue South, and I remember my wife Carla, who was playing flute at the time, came by the rehearsal, and she had her flute, and Mike said, "Oh, a flute, and can I take a look at it?" So she went, "Sure." So she hands him the flute, and he says, "I haven't played the flute in years," you know, and he picks up this flute, and he sounds like John Coltrane meets Jean Rampal, you know, and just like destroys the flute. And hit the ground, you know. I mean, he was that kind of musician, just so connected and natural in everything he did, with such cleverness and joy of life, and it was inspiring and aggravating simultaneously. Like, how do you do that, you know? But he was just a great guy, and I always really appreciated the time spent with him.
Randy's left us for a second, but we'll continue here. Kenny, did you play with Mike?
A few times. I never played in this band, but we were on several projects together. You know, some of the time we spent together was pretty personal, and some stuff I can't really exactly talk about, but we had some times outside of music that we hung out together. Within music, the projects I was on with him, of course, I was awestruck. And again, I guess it's a little bit similar to Randy, but how comfortable he made me feel about what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, he made me feel like he really dug what I was doing, which, you know, gave me great confidence to go on. It gave me the inspiration to go on. And I just, of course, I can remember so many times I heard him play, and I just remember, I think that was the point you could pinpoint where what you could play on the saxophone was expanded. Everybody could point to, well, now the saxophone, what's capable of playing the saxophone has just been expanded. That was the sensation hearing, and because I had some actually I was once with a saxophone teacher. We were listening to him. He said, you know, this is the first time since like John Coltrane, you feel like the tenor sax has been expanded again as to what do things that was never done on it. You know, and maybe that's happened again today with Chris. You know, Chris Potter, I think people point to. But it's like this line, you know, and Michael definitely took it to a new level. The thing I remember the most is just warm conversations I had with him and how he made me feel about the way I played.
Absolutely. And Adam, you played with Mike. What was it like comping for Mike?
Wow, I mean, it was great. You know, he was so receptive. You know, he was such. In addition to being obviously such a saxophonistic giant, he was also a great improviser, and I think held that, you know, as I remember, you know, the thing that indicated to him whether he was playing great or not. I mean, I remember, I don't know if this is accurate across the board, but in my experience playing with him, sometimes we'd play a gig and he would would be unbelievable. And we'd come off the stage and I'd go, Mike, man, that was, and he'd go, oh, I couldn't, you know, I wasn't really making it. And I'd go, are you crazy? That was like unbelievable. And sometimes, and this happened relatively rarely, he'd come off the stage and he'd have a smile and he had sounded unbelievable and maybe different that night, and he'd say, you know what, I felt like I was really improvising tonight. And he really, I could tell that that's what really meant something to him. He could always play the saxophone in an astounding way with, you know, just heaps of energy. And I felt as an accompanist that he was very reactive and open to what you played, you know, while you were comping, you know. And I tried to be, you know, I listened very carefully to what he was doing and always played in groups of his where there were fantastic rhythm sections that would, you know, provide a lot of different opportunities to interact with while being supportive. But he was very open about accompaniment. And I sort of, not echoing what Bob said, but I had I think Pat Metheny a couple times said to me, you know, we belong to a special club. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, we're among the few guitarists who had to play solos after Mike soloed. And it was sort of like this, oh man, you know. So, I mean, just playing with him, aside from all of the obvious virtuosic harmonic things, I mean, the amount of energy he generated was so unbelievable, you know. And to play with him and to also try to take a solo, you know, was one of the great learning experiences of my life, because it was so inspiring and, you know, and awe-inspiring and sort of intimidating and all of those things, and it really made you feel like, okay, what am I doing? You know, what's my, you know, when you're standing next to that kind of identity and strength and energy, it really inspires you to sort of figure out where that is in yourself. And to echo everything everybody else has said, you know, he was just one of the greatest human beings. He was such an amazing person, and as Kenny said, you know, was so encouraging and you know, but would say stuff sometimes as a band leader, hey, you know, I think this could be this, or, you know, some very, very useful tips, and he was just amazing to be around.
And Amanda, what about Mike as an uncle?
He was amazing. I mean, that's the thing. He was such a virtuoso and just an incredible musician in every sense of the word. But I remember him most fondly as an uncle and as a family man. He was a wonderful father and to his kids, and a wonderful husband, and a great uncle, and very funny, very goofy, and just a very kind soul. So for me, I remember Thanksgivings. We used to spend every Thanksgiving together, and just family. That's what I think of. And also just being on tour. I remember as a kid, I got to go on tour with the Brecker brothers, and one of my most memorable trips, I remember, it was going to Aruba with the whole band, and just getting to experience that as a little girl hanging out with the band. I felt like the coolest person on earth, but it was a great experience, and just watching them on stage and off stage, and just seeing the balance of being a family man and then just getting up on stage and killing it. So it's just amazing treat.
Randy, you worked literally thousands of sessions with Mike, recording sessions, live dates, whatever. Any gig or any sessions particularly stand out?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. You know, we worked so many things for so long. I probably couldn't pin one down, but you know, just coincidentally, I'll just bring this up because it's so funny. If you look at it from my perspective, talking about playing after Mike, there's a video up on YouTube, which is, I think, it's Brecker Brothers at the Bottom Line in Japan, if you want to look it up. And somehow, I'd always make fun of the fact that we're going to play Skunk Funk as fast as is humanly possible. And I don't know who counted it off that night. Somebody counted it off really as fast. It was faster than I could play it. And Mike just killed his solo. And if you zero in on me, you can just see absolute fear develop in my eyes, knowing that I had to follow this. So, and I somehow did. But that was quite a common occurrence in my development. Was trying, as the other guys mentioned, trying to follow him some of his solos. But you know, we at the same time, we always had a great time together. We were meant to be next to each other's side, and we miss him very much. I'm just grateful that I can listen to him and see him perform on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. You imagine he missed all that. I remember calling him up shortly before he passed away and telling him about YouTube. He hadn't heard of it before, so I thought he'd really enjoy it. So look how much things have changed now.
Yeah, it's a different world. But going back when you were teenagers in a Philadelphia suburb, who first picked up an instrument? Was it you on the trumpet and then Mike later on the sax? How was that process?
Well, we had music all through the house. My father was a wonderful pianist, singer, and arranger, composer. Really talented. He actually played on one of my records called "Into the Sun." I worked a tune that he wrote when I was 2 weeks old for me, called "The Hottest Man in Town," where he forecast that I'm going to play horn and maybe a hot fife and love music even more than my wife. That's some of the words. I was 2 weeks old, so I was predestined, I think, to play. We both were. But I started, because he was a particular fan of the trumpet. Clifford Brown was alive in Philly and playing quite a bit, so that was the talk of the town. And he loved all Clifford records. He loved Miles. He knew Miles a little, knew Dizzy. So in third grade, in this suburban little school, they only had trumpets or clarinets really available for study. So I grabbed the trumpet when I was in third grade. And conversely, when Mike came up 3 years later, they still only had trumpets or clarinets. So he, as he put it, got stuck with the clarinet. He didn't want to play the same instrument as I did. But that developed into, I think he was in ninth grade. He had been studying all those years with a very good teacher, I might add. His name was Leon Lester from the Philadelphia Orchestra. But he never really enjoyed the clarinet, and he switched to alto when he fell in love with Cannonball. I think it was in 8th or ninth grade. And then I went off to college, so I'm not sure what happened after that, but I think in 10th grade he switched to tenor. And I hadn't heard him play, really, because I was off in New York and I joined Horace Silver's band. I'll just tell the story really quickly. We happened to be in the same town together when Mike went to IU. We had a band with Randy Sankey called Mrs. Seaman's Sound Band, and they had some summer gigs in Chicago. And I was playing with Horace at the, what's the name of that club was in Chicago? I can't think of it now.
Jazz Showcase?
Was it?
The Jazz Showcase?
No, it was the other one. Was on Wells Street where Miles...
Blackhawk?
Blackhawk.
No, well, it was a club right down the street where Mike was living, and we organized a jam session one day. Billy Cobham came over, bent him up, and we went over to his rehearsal space with his band. And I hadn't heard him play for maybe 3 years because I had been away, and he just he was probably 19 years old, 18 or 19 years old, and our jaws dropped. That's all I can say. He was not, he developed much further, but the essential Michael Brecker was already there, kind of mixing, if I put it simplistically, Coltrane with King Curtis and Junior Walker. He both had all those things in his playing at that age, and I'll never forget the looks on Benny's and Billy's face. And he moved to New York maybe within that year. I think he moved to New York when he was 19 or 20, and things went on from there.
Now, didn't your father have relationships with musicians who visited the house when you were a kid?
Well, there were some. John Hendricks was over once, and I don't think Mike was playing it. I was really young, maybe 11 or 12, and I sat in it. They had jam sessions at the house on Sundays, and I played. I forget the tune. I can hear the tune. I just can't remember what tune he was singing. But Dad had just bought his first tape recorder, and I heard myself back for the first time. And I actually, for a second anyway, sounded pretty good. When I played a phrase, all the cats laughed because they thought it was so cute. And imagine this: I saw John Hendricks it was probably about 10 years ago when he was appearing at the Blue Note with Moody, and he asked about that tape. He said, "What happened to that tape? You were a little kid." And I said, "Oh man, I don't know where it is." And he said, "Well, that was history. You should go find it." So like Amanda, I had a great upbringing with cats coming over, local cats coming over. Like I said, my father knew Dizzy and had something to do with the original music in around in the tents. Like in Westbury, there's still a tent. In Philly, there were 3 local tents, Valley Forge, I forget the other 2, where they presented jazz concerts on Mondays, and he had some kind of connection with the guys who started that and maybe invested in it or something. So he knew a lot of the famous cats, so whenever we went to see somebody, they'd always acknowledge that they knew him. I was all very proud that he knew, like Miles and Dizzy and et cetera, et cetera. So I was drawn in by that too.
What was the origin of the Brecker Brothers band? When did you guys decide you were going to work together?
Well, that came in late '74 into '75, and I've told the story many times. I'll try to tell it as quickly as possible. But we had a band, Dreams, together, '71 and '72. Then we kind of rejoined Horace in '73. Then Billy Cobham hit kind of big, so we joined Billy's band for a couple of years, and then I started writing. I was also friends with Dave Sanborn, who I had met at that aforementioned Stan Kenton band camp when we were 15. And Dave had just moved to New York from Woodstock. He was in town, and we had stayed in touch all those years. We were pretty close friends. And I had the idea of writing for a 3-man horn section, me, Mike, and Sanborn. So I just started. I hadn't studied composition or arranging, but I was just everybody was writing in those days, and I had a keyboard, I had a piano, I had an electric piano, and most of all I had a clavinet that I loved. So I just would, with pencil and paper and ping-ponging 2 cassette recorders, I started writing music for that instrumentation, and we'd get together and rehearse. Don Grolnick, Will Lee, and Chris Parker lived in the same building, so we used one of their pads to rehearse. Grolnick was also writing stuff. Steve Kahn, who was also at these rehearsals, lived close by. He was writing stuff, so we were rehearsing all this stuff. We were all writing. I actually had an intent to do a solo record and call it Randy Brecker, featuring all these guys. I had 9 charts when I was finally done, including Skunk Funk, et cetera, et cetera. And a gentleman named Steve Backer called up, who had just signed a production deal with a new label called Arista, which was run by Clive Davis, who we knew from Dreams when he signed us to Columbia. And was actually Steve who said, if you call, I'd heard about this music you're writing, and I was just getting ready to do a demo. He said, if you call this band the Brecker Brothers, I'll sign you immediately. You won't have to do a demo. You won't have to shop it. And at first I resisted because I wanted it to be a solo record. And I said, well, I have to think about that because, first of all, there's 3 guys in the front line. Sanborn will look funny. This will be a long-lost cousin or something. But it was such a nice opportunity. The 2 of them, they talked me into it. And I don't regret the decision. It was a good name. We had never even imagine that. We've been playing together for 8 or 9 years by that point, and maybe not that long, but a good 7 or 8 years, and nobody ever coined that phrase. We never thought of it. Brecker Brothers kind of rolls off the tongue. So I said, okay.
Something so iconic, man, and that happens so often that it wasn't your idea.
Yeah, it was just happenstance.
Yeah, generations of.
Yeah, and a little addendum to that story. So we recorded the 9 tunes. I remember once Clive came to the rehearsal too. It was Harvey Mason on that tune and drums and all the aforementioned guys, and we had Ralph McDonald in percussion. As a complete joke, we counted off Skunk Funk really fast. Like it was just a joke, and we played it, and everybody laughed. That was pretty funny. Of course, we ended up playing it like that eventually. But the thing that actually sold the record, and that's pure happenstance, is the fact that I had a meeting with Clive, and he, in his Clivean way, mentioned that we needed a single. And I said, no, look, you're already calling it Brecker Brothers. It was supposed to be my solo record. I just wanted it to be all these 9 tunes. That was the intent. It sounds great. He says, well, it does sound great, but you guys need a single. And his own way, he intimated that he wasn't going to put it out unless we did a single. So here we go. We were in a tough spot. We went back to our little rehearsal studio, and the force was really with us. I don't know how else to say it. In 3 hours or 4 hours, we jammed up a tune. Everybody had little ideas. Oh, let's do this here, let's do that there. We'll add it apart. And the tune was called Sneaking Up Behind You. And we went in the studio, recorded it. Clive heard it and loved it. So stuck it on the record, and that's what they pushed, and that's what really made us, quote, famous, was the fact that that tune went up the R&B charts and the urban music, whatever they called it back then. It got up to about number 2. And Brecker Brothers Band, people thought we were brothers in that sense, and we got on a lot of R&B shows, opening for Parliament, Funkadelic, Chaka Khan, and that's what really sold the thing, not Skunk Funk and all the stuff I had written. But that eventually caught on, the whole thing. But we had the advantage of having a hit single, which we tried to recreate on the next 5 records, and never happened again.
Yeah, it's hard to recreate magic in a bottle sometimes. Before we jump into Randy Pop, a number of us are deeply involved with education. I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. Bob, you're involved at the USC, not the USC, at USC where you run the jazz department. What are today's students like? What's in the head of an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old who's trying to get into this music today, as opposed to where you guys were in the 70s?
Oh, well, that's a whole long diatribe. But in a nutshell, with all the information available via the internet, students and fairly comprehensive jazz programs in the schools that weren't quite as comprehensive when I was going to school. These kids have a lot of the information. It still boils down to what they do with it and how dedicated they are to working it all out.
Hello, Sonny.
I don't know.
Oh my God!
Yeah, my dog. He's a jazz fan, and
look at that face.
Wow.
You heard me talking about him. Anyway,
my dog.
The big difference, I mean, when I was younger and going to school and learning the music, I would go out and buy an LP, and it was something I held in my hand, and I read the back, and I played it hundreds of times, and I did unspeakable things with the LP cover, and I won't go any further than that. But I mean, there was somehow less information but deeper contact is the way I see it. By just this process of wearing out a recording, you would learn all the nuance and learn all the notes and somehow take a lot away from it. The other thing is there was a lot of playing going on back then. There was work. I mean, there were bands. There were big bands. I mean, I played in big bands for 5 years straight, pretty much, between Buddy Rich and Thad and Mel, and subbing on Gil's band and Louis Bellson and all the rest. So I don't think that exists quite the same way. But I mean, look, if you're dedicated and you do the work, you're going to arrive at the same place. You're going to play great, and that's always been the way, and will continue to be the way, from what I can see.
Kenny Warner, in this age of YouTube and so much information, What do you see with your students at NYU?
Well, I'm not at NYU anymore. I stopped because I actually have a new job. I'm the artistic director of an institute at Berkeley, which they have since named the Effortless Mastery Institute.
I apologize. How long is the Effortless Mastery?
I was at NYU in a very nice adjunct situation for about 12 years, and they just, everybody knows my book. More people know my book than know me. It's just a real oddity, it's a real anomaly. And a lot of musicians have been very helped by it. I don't even know, it's like what Randy said about something that the biggest success thing was somebody else's idea. I mean, I wrote that book because it was spilling out of my mouth. I never thought anything would happen, and it's really become a very big imprint on a lot of people. Some of the emails I get still kind of almost make me blush, how people have been turned around by it. So Berkeley invested in me, the opportunity to set up courses. See, one of the things that is not discussed that much is the biggest way that a young musician can lose their way completely is by going to music school. He who shall not be named, that this is who shall not be spoken of, and I go to schools and I talk about it, and I talk about ways of coming back inside and coming from there, and people get really enthused, but then I split and they get back into the inevitable overwhelm. I say to students, how many of you have trouble practicing? And they all go kind of like that, and I say, how many of you think it's because you're lazy? And they all go like that. I say, you're not lazy, you're overwhelmed. And that is the biggest problem in school, and for some reason that has nothing to do with my interest or intention. I came up with great stuff to help people with that, and now Berkeley has taken me up on it as an institute for people to try to find their voice again, to be able to concentrate enough to practice something and have their playing improve rather than practice everything and have nothing change. And I'm very involved in it now. It's very much my future, and I can't believe how creative it is and how much rope they've given me to hang myself. So that's what I'm doing now as far as education. And what I get blown away by, if I came along today and there was, first of all, I have to say, there's a larger crop of amazing young musicians that I can ever remember on this planet at one time. I don't know what it is, if it's reincarnation or multiple generations or just DNA advancing, and I have no idea what stupid reason I have, but it's just a fact. And they come along, at 8 years old, they've got it all figured out. So there's got to be, reincarnation actually explains it the best to me. I don't know, if you assumed reincarnation, it would all make sense. But regardless of what the reason is, and I'm amazed, I don't think I would even try it today. I would say, you know what, God, there's enough guys already. Let me do something else. I don't think I would do it. These kids are so open-hearted. They're so dedicated. I'm blown away. I'm blown away by the dedication. And I think to myself, if I can be just a little emotional for a second, my daughter was just starting to move into music too. And I see them all like, if my daughter needed my help to become the musician she wanted to be, what wouldn't I do to help them? So I don't really have any agenda with these students. I look at them, I see what they might need, and I just want to help them any way they can, because I am so blown away by how dedicated they are. I don't know. We weren't like that. And we used to backbite each other. These kids are all in there for at least they've got me fooled. They're in it for each other. They're egging each other on. It's just amazing. I hope it portends of something really wonderful that we can't conceive of yet, because otherwise it's kind of hard to figure out what they're all going to do.
Randy, you travel all around the planet. You work with kids all around the planet. Is the attitude the same? Is there the love of the music and the thirst for knowledge globally?
Well, I wholeheartedly concur with Kenny. At least in the jazz world, in that form of music, there are many more great young musicians, all encouraging themselves, encouraging me when I go to places and hear them play. And when I hear young kids playing around New York, their knowledge and enthusiasm is just incredible. I wish I could say the same about pop music. I don't quite understand what's going on in that department, but as far as young, good musicians, it just shows you how jazz education can really help young players, whatever's going on now. It's just incredible. It really is.
Let's, in our closing moments over here, jump to this new release, Randy Pop Live. Randy, how did this recording come about?
Well, originally, my recollection was my wife, Ada Rovati, had the idea that I kind of poo-pooed to put something together that, with respect to all the records I played on in the 70s and 80s when there was a lot of studio work. And then Jeff Levinson, who works at the Blue Note Club in New York, also concurrently had an idea, and he had done a project with Kenny and Rosanna Vitro revisiting rock tunes that she loved, and Kenny did just a great job in revamping these tunes, kind of casting a new light on every tune, particularly What Is Hip by Tower of Power. That one stood out. So when Jeff came up with the idea, our first thought, of course, was to call Kenny and put a great band together and kind of do tunes. I sent Kenny a bunch of tunes, and whichever ones he felt an affinity for, we decided to do. And he just did. It's his record as much as my record. He just did a really great job in recasting these tunes with a bunch of original, crazy, some ideas that were just a thrill to play. And some I had to say, well, I hope I can do this, or I can either hope I can carry this through, or at least I hope I can play this. It was not easy stuff to learn, but everyone really put their full concentration in. Amanda was great. She has a it's not easy for a singer
God, yeah.
sing this stuff, but everybody did really well, so I'm really proud of this record.
Kenny, when you're dealing with iconic songs like I Can't Quit Her and New Frontier and James Brown material, how do you approach that from an arranging perspective?
Well, it depends on what the person I'm arranging for wants. I always put out this disclaimer. I'm a little nervous about this record because you could have just covered it and made them instrumentals instead of vocals, except for the ones that Amanda's singing on. And that's what I would have done, but they actually put it to me like, you know what you did to, like, What Is Hip? You know, how bizarre that became? What about a record like that, you know? So I've been saying, hey, if you love it, thank you. If you don't, it wasn't my idea, actually. But that is actually my instinct of how I arrange. I called it deranging, you know, getting it to the point where it has the remnants of what it's iconically known for, but it has something disorienting. I think it comes from the old days that Bob was alluding to, and you know, that where we all came from, where like we like to be in a state of mind. We looked at a wall and it was the most interesting thing you've ever seen in your life. You know, I still try to get there in my. I guess I'm still an old psychedelic hippie. I still try to get there in the music, and to arrange that way in a way as a way of trying to pierce that wall. That sounds like that tune, but am I high, or is that tune doing something really different? That's still kind of my favorite thing. But as I say, anyway, quickly, because I know we're out of time. The way I approach is I start with the characteristic elements of that tune, and then I wonder what I could do that would either counter that or distort that. And that's how I approach it with each tune. And so the tunes I chose of the ones Randy gave me, the ones where I had an idea of what would be the surreal or impressionistic version of the same thing. That's kind of what it is.
And in addition to great charts and great tunes, this is a fantastic band. Adam, could you tell us what it was like playing in a rhythm section with Kenny, John Patitucci, and Nate Smith on drums?
Fantastic. You know, Nate, I played a tremendous amount with. I was very happy he was part of it because he has a huge swath of abilities and has a certain kind of groove that a lot of other drummers in the jazz world don't have. He's super funky and really understands pop music, I feel, in a way that's pretty special. And John, I've also played with a lot in different circumstances. I love playing with him in something that gets to a very sort of groovy place because he has such a strong pocket, and him and Nate sounded amazing together. And I love playing with Kenny, like in any situation. It just, you know, in this particular one, you know, it's funny because I didn't hear the record for a while because there were a couple of years between recording it and now, and I remembered how great it was, and it's sort of in some sort of weird, organic, intuitive way when you were talking, Kenny, about the, you know, distorting things. I just felt like playing in that rhythm section with this unbelievably strong sort of funk pocket and the harmonic sophistication that Kenny would bring to these tunes, which, you know, it's sort of unforgiving because if you do too much, as I think you guys might echo, you know, it becomes something else. But I think a testament to how great Kenny is, both as an arranger and as a player, is that no matter how far we took it out, I felt like the what was crucial about these songs is still there. What gives these tunes their identity, and so an incredible rhythm section. You know, nothing but fun and groove and.
Yeah, we certainly get that when we hear it. Amanda, from your perspective as a vocalist, working in a group with these instrumental giants, was the music challenging?
Yes, it was. It was. Thank you, Kenny. No, it was. It was definitely challenging. But I'm always up for a good challenge, you know, especially in music, and it pushed me. And so for me, it was a very unique experience, something which I had never done before. Working with an all-star cast, being on stage with, you know, so many musicians that I admire and look up to, and first and foremost my dad. You know, so being up on stage with him for a week and playing 2 shows a night and sharing that was just a very unique experience, and it was wonderful. Definitely challenging. We didn't have much time. I think we kind of put things together. We went into rehearsal, and it was. I loved every minute of it. I would do it all over again. It was so fun.
Well, thankfully it was documented both on video and audio. People can check it out. And I wanted to ask you, Randy, where did this Randbop thing come from? You do a little vocalizing here on the recording.
All right, that's Randroid. That's my Randbop's my email. That was kind of a joke. The name came from great altoist Gary Bartz, who had a tour in Japan years ago, and he'd walk up to me early in the evening and say, "Randroid, you in there yet? Oh, no, you're not there yet. I'll come back and talk to you later." And he'd come back after we had a couple shots, et cetera, late at night, say, "Randroid, okay, let's talk." So I just kind of kept the name. It was his idea. And Randroid just comes out when Randy Brecker is too embarrassed to come out as himself.
How did you get into the vocalization, the rap aspect of it?
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. Horace Silver wrote lyrics to all his tunes. When we were on the road all those years ago, when we were in a bus or on a train, he'd always not only be writing music, but he'd be writing lyrics. So I kind of took it upon myself, especially when the computer thing, when I got my first laptop, I took it upon myself to try to write lyrics to some of the tunes I had written, and just write lyrics in general when I was kind of out and about. I was out and about a lot more than I am now. And somebody had to sing them, so I got together with my good friend, this was, about the year 2000 or 2001, and we decided to record all these tunes I had written lyrics for, and who best to sing them but Randroid. So we did a record called Hangin' in the City, Songs of Rhyme, Reason, Romance, and Raunch. Adam is on some of it, I think, right? Yeah. And it was a lot of fun to do. Some of it kind of tongue-in-cheek, and the critics definitely looked at it kind of with some trepidation, or weren't sure what to make of it. But out of all the records I've done, that might have been the most fun one to do. There's some really good stuff on there. We had to make sure there was good music on there, not only Randroid singing. But it was a lot of fun to do. Songs of Rhyme, Reason, Romance, and Raunch.
What songs were associated with Raunch?
Well, you just have to listen to the lyrics. There's one called Never Tell Her You Love Her Unless She's 3,000 Miles Away. That was one of them. This is before I was married.
Oh, man. That's great, man. Well, this has been a fantastic hour. It's so nice to see you guys and hear what you got to say. Randy and your beautiful daughter and friends. As a listener, I've known Randy since Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Right.
And I feel very lucky to know Randy and everyone involved here. This music is very special. As you can see from these people, they are very special people. That's where the music comes from. So I'm sure you will all want to wish Randy a happy 70th birthday. It seems kind of unbelievable you're going to be 70, man.
Yeah, it is unbelievable, believe me.
It's the new 50.
Yeah.
The new 50.
The new 50. Well, you're still here. You guys are still creating great music. And just want to go around here for one last time and have everyone extend their birthday wishes to Randy. First, Bob Mintzer.
Uh-oh.
Well, happy birthday, Randy. You're one of my favorite people to spend time with and play with, and I wish you all the very best now and forever.
Thank you.
Amen.
Kenny.
I could just echo what Bob said, Randy. I wish you health, everything your heart's desire, and there's nothing that could come to you that you don't richly deserve, my man. Happy birthday.
Adam.
Happy birthday, Randy. Thank you for all the incredible musical opportunities over the last 20 years, I think it's been. Unbelievable. And may things just get better and more beautiful as time goes on.
Amanda.
Happy birthday, Dad. We'll get to celebrate together, but I love you so much. And 31 years, best dad ever, and just such an inspiration. So.
Oh, thank you, kid.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks,
And
Bob.
thank you all. Yeah, these guys are all my best friends. I really appreciate this, and I hope we'll play together soon and hit as soon as possible. Thanks.